In the corporate world, the biggest threat isn't the loudest person in the room. It's the one who thinks they're the smartest but never bothers to check who they're actually sitting with. My name is Natalie Brooks, 35, formerly the head of strategic analysis at Kenshaw Technologies in Minneapolis, Minnesota. After 8 years of dedication and quietly helping the company navigate through 2 major crises, I was sidelined by a new boss with a fake smile and limitless ambition. He thought I was just a stubborn employee. What he didn't know, I was also the company's biggest veto power. And when he stole my work to make himself look good, I took everything back, including the corner office he thought he'd earned. It all started on a frigid January morning in Minneapolis, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache and your breath crystallize before it even leaves your mouth. I remember staring out my office window, watching snowflakes dance in the wind while clutching my 3rd cup of coffee. 8 years at Kenshaw Technologies had taught me to appreciate these quiet moments before the storm. I'd risen through the ranks from junior analyst to head of strategic analysis through a combination of obsessive attention to detail and an uncanny ability to predict market shifts. My team respected me not because I demanded it, but because I'd earned it. Together, we'd steered the company through the 2020 pandemic crisis when our manufacturing clients were shutting down left and right. "The quarterly numbers look promising," said Liam, my deputy, dropping a folder on my desk. "Customer retention is up 12% compared to last year." I smiled, knowing those numbers reflected months of intensive data modeling and strategy adjustments. The board meeting should go smoothly then. What I didn't tell Liam, what I didn't tell anyone except my lawyer Rachel Mendez and the chairman Lawrence Meyer, was that during the 2020 crisis, I had quietly acquired a controlling interest in the company through a trust called North Trail Partners. When Kenshaw's stock plummeted during the pandemic, I'd seen an opportunity and leveraged every asset I had, plus a small inheritance from my grandmother, to become the majority shareholder with 51%. I didn't want power, I wanted protection. For myself, my team, and the company I'd helped build, it was my insurance policy against short-sighted decisions by executives who didn't understand our business model. The intercom buzzed. "Natalie, there's a company-wide meeting in the main conference room in 15 minutes. Mandatory attendance." I frowned. There was no meeting on my calendar. "What's it about?" "The new COO is making his introduction." New COO? That was the first I'd heard of it. As head of strategic analysis and a member of the executive committee, I should have been consulted about any C-suite hire. I grabbed my tablet and headed for the conference room, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. The room was already packed when I arrived. I spotted Lawrence Meyer, our chairman, at the front. He gave me a barely perceptible nod as I slipped into a seat near the back. Beside him stood a man I'd never seen before, tall, with carefully styled dark hair and an expensive suit that seemed out of place in our Midwestern office. "Good morning, everyone," Lawrence began. "I'd like to introduce Gavin Thorne, our new Chief Operating Officer. Gavin comes to us from Boston with an impressive track record of operational excellence. He'll be leading our strategic realignment initiative effective immediately." Gavin stepped forward with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you, Lawrence. It's a pleasure to meet you all." His voice carried a faint East Coast accent. "I've spent the last few weeks reviewing Kenshaw's operations, and I see tremendous potential here." I narrowed my eyes. Few weeks? No one had mentioned an executive review was taking place. "But potential isn't performance," Gavin continued, clicking to his first slide. It showed a downward trend in quarterly growth. "As you can see, we've been experiencing diminishing returns despite increased investment." The chart was misleading. It showed only the last 2 quarters without the context of our 5-year growth trajectory, or the seasonal fluctuations typical in our industry. I felt my jaw tighten. That's why I'll be implementing what I call velocity thinking, a framework that prioritizes speed to market over endless analysis. His gaze swept the room, briefly landing on me. "Some of you may find this adjustment challenging, but I assure you, it's necessary for Kenshaw's survival in today's competitive landscape." For the next 30 minutes, Gavin outlined his vision: streamlined processes, faster decision-making, and bold moves to capture market share. With each slide, my concern deepened. His strategy ignored the complex relationships we'd built with clients who valued thorough analysis and customized solutions, the very foundation of our success. When he finished, there was polite applause and a few questions, which he answered with rehearsed responses about paradigm shifts and disruptive innovation. Corporate speak that sounded impressive but said nothing. As people filed out, I approached Lawrence. "Can we talk about this?" "Not now." "Natalie," he murmured. "Gavin's appointment was a board decision. Give him a chance." But his data presentation was deliberately misleading. If we rush implementation as he's suggesting, just work with him. Lawrence cut me off, his eyes darting to where Gavin was chatting with the CFO. "Please." I nodded stiffly and left, my mind racing. Lawrence knew my concerns were valid. Why was he so eager to defer to this newcomer? The answer came the next morning in the form of an email. Gavin was scheduling individual meetings with all department heads. Mine was set for 2 p.m. I spent the morning preparing. If Gavin wanted to discuss strategy, I'd give him strategy, backed by comprehensive data and trend analysis. I pulled together customer retention metrics, satisfaction scores, and my team's latest predictive models showing potential growth areas. By lunchtime, I had a presentation that any reasonable executive would find compelling. At exactly 2 p.m., I knocked on the door of what had been our previous COO's office. Gavin had already redecorated. The family photos and nautical art were gone, replaced by sleek modern prints and a glass sculpture that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Natalie, come in," he said without looking up from his computer. "Take a seat." I sat, waiting as he finished typing. 5 minutes passed before he finally acknowledged me. "So, strategic analysis," he said, leaning back. "Tell me what your department actually does." The dismissive tone wasn't subtle. "We identify market trends and client needs to develop sustainable growth strategies," I replied evenly. "Last year, our predictive models helped retain 3 major clients worth $12 million in annual revenue when they were considering competitors." He glanced at the tablet I'd brought. "You've prepared something?" I nodded and began sharing my screen on his wall display. "I thought you might want to see the data behind our current strategy and some projections for—" "Let me stop you right there," he interrupted, holding up a hand. "I've seen plenty of spreadsheets. What I need are results, not theories." "These aren't theories," I countered, maintaining my composure. "These are evidence-based projections that have proven accurate within a 3% margin over the past 3 years. He smiled thinly. "And yet, Kenshaw's growth is slowing. If you look at the full 5-year trend, Natalie," he cut me off again. "In this market, looking backward is a luxury we can't afford. We need quick wins, not academic discussions about data models." For the next 20 minutes, he outlined what he expected from my department: shorter analysis cycles, simplified reporting, and what he called actionable insights rather than data dumps. Each point revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of our business model and client relationships. "One more thing," he said as I was leaving. "Effective immediately. All client-facing materials need to be approved by my office before distribution. No exceptions." I paused at the door. "Even the weekly analytics reports? Our clients expect those every Monday morning. Especially those. I want to ensure we're presenting a unified message." His smile was practiced. "Just send them to me by Friday afternoon." That Friday, I submitted our reports as requested. They contained our latest client-specific analyses, including a detailed risk assessment for Meridian Manufacturing, our largest account. The report identified potential supply chain vulnerabilities and recommended preventative measures. Monday morning, I discovered Gavin had conducted a call with Meridian's executives without inviting me or anyone from my team. When I accessed the shared folder, I found a modified version of our report, with my team's attribution removed and the Meridian-specific data presented as part of Gavin's new velocity framework. I printed both versions and walked straight to his office. "Do you have a minute?" I asked. not waiting for an invitation to enter. He glanced up with mild annoyance. I'm preparing for a board call, so make it quick. I placed both reports on his desk. You presented our analysis to Meridian as your own work. I presented Kenshaw's analysis to a Kenshaw client, he corrected, barely glancing at the papers. Is there a problem? My team spent weeks developing those models. You removed our attribution and claimed it as part of your framework, which doesn't even exist yet. He leaned back, studying me. Natalie, individual credit isn't important. What matters is that Kenshaw wins. Transparency matters, accuracy matters, and frankly, professional ethics matter. Something cold flickered in his eyes. Are you questioning my ethics? I'm questioning your decision to remove attribution from work you didn't do. He stood up slowly. I think you're missing the bigger picture. Change is difficult, I understand that. But this resistance to a new direction isn't helping your position here. The threat was barely veiled. I held his gaze. I'm not resistant to change. I'm resistant to misrepresentation. Noted, he said flatly. Is there anything else? I considered pushing further but decided against it. Not at the moment. That night, I called Rachel Mendez, my lawyer and trusted friend since law school. He's laying groundwork to push you out, she said after I explained the situation. Document everything, dates, times, copies of original work, the modified versions, any witness who can corroborate. I already started, I replied. But why would the board support this? Our department's performance metrics are excellent. New executives often want their own people, Rachel said. And if he's convincing enough about his vision, they might give him leeway to restructure. Over the next 4 weeks, Gavin's pattern became clear. He would take my team's analyses, repackage them with his branding, and present them to clients or the board. When questioned, he would credit the team vaguely, but ensure he was seen as the strategic genius driving improvements. Meanwhile, he systematically excluded me from client meetings and executive discussions. My access to certain data systems was quietly restricted. He hired 2 new, strategic advisors who reported directly to him, bypassing my department entirely. I documented everything meticulously, building a case while continuing to ensure my team delivered excellent work. If Gavin wanted to play politics, that was his choice. I would focus on substance. Then came the day I arrived at the office to find my access card denied at the security gate. That's strange, said the security guard, trying my card again. Let me call upstairs. After a brief conversation, he frowned. Ms. Brooks, you're to report to the executive conference room. Someone will meet you there. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt surreal. When I reached the conference room, Gavin was waiting with a woman I recognized as Jessica Winters from Human Resources. Natalie, please sit down, Gavin said, gesturing to a chair across from them. Jessica slid a folder toward me. After careful consideration of the company's direction, we've determined that your position is no longer aligned with our strategic goals. I opened the folder to find a severance agreement, 2 months' salary, standard confidentiality clauses, and a waiver of claims against the company. Effective immediately, Gavin added, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. We've prepared a box with your personal items. Jessica will escort you out after we conclude here. I looked between them, keeping my expression neutral, despite the anger bubbling inside. May I ask what specific performance issues led to this decision? Jessica shifted uncomfortably. This isn't performance-related, it's a structural reorganization. A reorganization that apparently only affects me, I noted. Interesting timing, considering I raised concerns about attribution of my team's work. This decision was made weeks ago, Gavin countered smoothly. Your department is being absorbed into the new Strategic Operations Division under my direct leadership. I closed the folder without signing. I'd like a copy of this to review with my attorney. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. That's unnecessary. The terms are standard and generous. Nevertheless, I'd like my attorney to review it. I stood up, maintaining eye contact with Gavin. Please email a copy to me and to Rachel Mendez at Mendez Legal. Her contact information is in my personnel file. Jessica nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Of course, we'll send it right away. Gavin remained seated, his smile tight. I'm sorry it came to this, Natalie. I wish you the best in your future endeavors. I didn't bother responding to his insincerity. Instead, I followed Jessica to collect my belongings and left the building with dignity intact. Despite the curious glances from colleagues who had heard rumors of my departure, once in my car, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel the full force of my anger and humiliation. Then I took a deep breath, started the engine, and called Rachel. It happened, I said when she answered. They terminated me this morning. Did you sign anything? No, ask them to send it to us both for review. Good. Come to my office. We need to talk strategy. At home that evening, I logged into the secure portal for North Trail Partners. As the controlling entity, I had access to all board communications. There I found the agenda for Monday's quarterly board meeting, including Gavin's proposal for deep structural reorganization, which involved eliminating my entire department and redistributing key personnel to his direct reports. The attached financial projections used manipulated data to show inflated savings and growth potential. He'd taken our models and twisted them to support his narrative. I forwarded everything to Rachel with a simple message. Monday, 10 a.m., time to play my card. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Rachel and I worked methodically, compiling evidence of Gavin's misrepresentations, data manipulation, and strategic errors. We prepared a comprehensive counter-proposal that would protect the company's intellectual assets while addressing legitimate operational concerns. Monday morning, I dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, serious, commanding. This wasn't about revenge, it was about correcting a course that could damage a company I'd helped build for 8 years. Rachel met me in the lobby of Kenshaw's building. Ready? I nodded, feeling strangely calm. More than ready. The boardroom fell silent when we entered. Lawrence Meyer looked unsurprised, but the other board members exchanged confused glances. Gavin, who had been mid-presentation, froze when he saw me. Ms. Brooks, he said, recovering quickly. This is a closed board meeting. If you have concerns about your termination, HR is the appropriate channel. Lawrence cleared his throat. Actually, Gavin, I invited Natalie. Or rather, I invited the representative of North Trail Partners. He gestured to the empty seats at the table. Please, join us. Gavin's confusion was evident. North Trail Partners? I don't understand. I took my seat, placing my portfolio on the table. North Trail Partners holds 51% of Kenshaw's shares. I am its legal representative and principal. The color drained from Gavin's face as he processed this information. That's impossible. The ownership structure was disclosed in the documentation you received upon joining. Lawrence finished for him. Perhaps you didn't review it thoroughly. I opened my portfolio and addressed the board. I've been made aware of proposals to significantly alter Kenshaw's operational structure. As the majority shareholder, I have serious concerns about these changes and their potential impact on our client relationships and long-term stability. For the next 40 minutes, I methodically dismantled Gavin's proposal, pointing out data manipulations, unrealistic projections, and strategic contradictions. I presented evidence of how he had misrepresented my team's work, replaced experienced personnel with his associates from previous companies, and potentially compromised client relationships through rushed implementations. Throughout my presentation, Gavin shifted from shock to anger to desperate damage control. He tried interrupting several times, only to be silenced by Lawrence. The board should know, I concluded, that Mr. Thorne was aware of concerns about attribution of work and data integrity, yet chose to terminate the messenger rather than address the issues. This raises serious questions about leadership judgment and ethical standards. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, board member Eleanor Richards spoke. These are troubling allegations. Mr. Thorne, how do you respond? Gavin straightened his tie, visibly struggling for composure. This is clearly a case of a disgruntled former employee attempting to sabotage necessary changes. Ms. Brooks may own shares, but she lacks the operational experience to understand the competitive pressures we face. Actually, Lawrence interjected, Natalie has been instrumental in navigating Kenshaw through two major market disruptions. Her team's analytics formed the backbone of our recovery strategy in 2020, which you apparently claimed as your own, added board member James Wilson, flipping through the evidence I'd distributed. These before and after documents are concerning, to say the least. The discussion continued for another hour. Gavin's attempts to defend his actions grew increasingly desperate and contradictory. When the board called for a brief recess, he approached me in the hallway. "This won't end well for you," he hissed, all pretense of professionalism gone. "You may have blindsided me today, but I still have influence." I met his gaze calmly. My boss took credit for my work, but he didn't even know who he was stealing from. That's your fundamental problem. Gavin, you underestimate people you consider beneath you. When the board reconvened, their decision was unanimous. Gavin would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Lawrence turned to me after the vote. "Natalie, given your position as majority shareholder and your demonstrated strategic acumen, the board would like to offer you the COO position." I shook my head. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in that role. What I am proposing is an expanded mandate for the Strategic Analysis Department, with direct reporting lines to the board and a transparent framework for attribution and implementation." I outlined my vision, a company culture built on respect for expertise, transparent communication, and collaborative innovation. No more siloed decisions or credit stealing. I proposed an anonymous feedback system that would allow employees at all levels to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. The board approved my proposal with minimal modifications. As we adjourned, Lawrence pulled me aside. "You could have taken his job. Why didn't you?" I smiled slightly. "Because I don't want his job. I want to do mine well, with the resources and respect it deserves." The aftermath was swift. Gavin made one last desperate attempt to salvage his position, sending a company-wide email portraying himself as a victim of entrenched interest resistant to necessary change. The message backfired spectacularly when several employees replied with specific examples of how he had taken credit for their work or dismissed valid concerns. 3 weeks later, he was officially terminated without severance. I didn't celebrate the news when Lawrence told me there was no satisfaction in watching someone else's downfall, even if they had orchestrated their own demise. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. My team was expanded, with additional resources for data analytics and client engagement. The anonymous feedback system was implemented company-wide, creating new channels for communication that bypassed hierarchical barriers. The corner office that Gavin had so proudly occupied was converted into a collaborative workspace for cross-departmental projects. It was symbolic, perhaps, but it sent a message. At Kenshaw, no individual was more important than the collective expertise of our people. 6 months later, our client retention was at an all-time high. Employee satisfaction scores had increased by 18%. We were attracting talent from competitors who had heard about our collaborative culture and transparent attribution policies. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I received a LinkedIn message from a former colleague who had moved to a company in Chicago. "You might want to know that Gavin Thorne just joined us as VP of Operations, already taking credit for a market analysis I prepared last month." I smiled wryly and typed a simple response. Never underestimate someone who quietly documents everything. The experience taught me that in the corporate world, power doesn't always look like you expect it to. Sometimes it's not the person with the corner office or the impressive title. Sometimes it's the person who builds relationships, who knows the details, who understands how things actually work rather than how they appear to work. I could have become cynical, could have used my majority stake to rule with the same heavy hand that Gavin had attempted. Instead, I chose to create the kind of environment where talent is recognized, attribution is respected, and leadership is earned through actions rather than assertions. That's the real corner office, the space you create where people want to follow you, not because they have to, but because they believe in your vision and trust your integrity. And as for Gavin's bonus, the board redirected those funds to establish a company-wide profit-sharing program that rewards collaborative achievements rather than individual glory-seeking. It seems fitting that his attempt to claim all the credit ultimately led to everyone sharing in the success. Sometimes justice doesn't look like what you expect. Sometimes it's not about taking back what was stolen from you, but about creating something better in its place, something that ensures no one else has to experience what you went through. That's the office I'm building now. No corner required,